February 4, 2026. London. What began as a routine winter morning inside Buckingham Palace abruptly escalated into one of the most severe internal royal crises in modern history. According to multiple senior sources, the status of Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet entered what officials privately described as critical territory after a sealed legal brief was delivered to Windsor Castle at dawn. If you're just joining this story, make sure to stay with us, because every layer that followed only deepened the shock. By that evening, palace officials confirmed that both children had been formally removed from Meghan Markle's custodial influence under emergency protocols. The trigger, insiders say, was an unexplained and unauthorized withdrawal of the children from their Santa Barbara private schools on January 31st. Administrators reportedly flagged the withdrawal as an immediate welfare concern when no forwarding school, educational plan, or parental explanation was provided. Neither child, sources claim, was enrolled for the spring term. If this already sounds alarming, subscribe now, because this is only the beginning. On February 2nd, Princess Anne convened an unscheduled crisis summit inside Windsor Castle. Witnesses describe her entering the room carrying a red folder stamped "Immediate Custodial Breach." She reportedly placed it before King Charles and delivered a blunt assessment: "We have tolerated image management for years. This is something else entirely." Inside the dossier were allegations of cancelled pediatric appointments, blocked communication with royal welfare officials, and documentation suggesting the dissolution of an education trust previously established for the children's UK future. But the most explosive material came from a confidential intelligence memo dated January 29th. According to senior advisors, it outlined what was described as a deliberate, months-long preparation for total maternal disengagement. Before we go further, hit like if you believe child welfare should never be secondary to branding or publicity. The memo allegedly referenced non-disclosure agreements with overseas financiers, legal refusals to participate in joint custody frameworks, and internal directives ordering the removal of the children's names from future media projects. Royal legal advisors interpreted the pattern as custodial abandonment, not co-parenting. Within hours, Princess and authorized Duchess Sophie of Edinburgh to activate emergency safeguarding procedures, opening a formal case file that was immediately transmitted to both UK and California family courts. Then came Prince William. Leaving an economic summit in Manchester, he arrived at Windsor and was handed the same red folder. According to those present, after reviewing the final page, he stated plainly, "This is no longer about reputations. It is about the survival of two children, emotionally, legally, historically." If you want continued updates on this unfolding royal confrontation, make sure you're subscribed and notifications are on. By the morning of February 3rd, the Royal Advisory Council convened behind closed doors. In an unprecedented move, Prince William invoked a rarely used clause under the Royal Succession Stabilization Act, a provision designed to protect royal minors from identity erasure or displacement. The vote was unanimous. What followed was swift and structural. First, international travel privileges for the children were suspended pending dual authorization from Crown-appointed guardians. Second, all commercial use of the children's names, likenesses, and royal branding was frozen under privacy statutes. Third, a new multi-million-pound restoration fund was announced to support education, emotional care, and long-term reintegration. This was not a press maneuver. It was institutional firewalling. If you're still watching, comment below, was this overdue protection or an overreach of royal power? As the story broke globally, additional layers emerged. Sources claimed Meghan Markle had been pitching a solo documentary project repositioning her narrative, one that allegedly reframed the children as part of a personal brand reset. Royal officials, anticipating this, reportedly submitted a sealed audit to the Privy Council detailing attempts to monetize the children's identities through trademarks, media contracts, and licensing proposals. Within hours, associated accounts were frozen, pending sponsorships collapsed, and references to the children quietly vanished from streaming platforms. Prince Harry, according to insiders, was blindsided. His request for temporary custodial authority was denied, citing instability, unresolved residency issues, and lack of independent infrastructure. A formal letter delivered by Royal Courier informed him that guardianship now rested solely under Crown protocol. No emotional language. No negotiation. If you believe this marks a permanent fracture in the Sussex saga, share this video now. Meanwhile, inside Windsor, Catherine, Princess of Wales, assumed oversight of the children's emotional support framework. Trusted caregivers were reassigned. Integration with extended family quietly began. One single image, released without caption, showed Lilibet holding Princess Charlotte's hand while leaving chapel grounds. The message was unmistakable. By February 1st, a court ruling finalized what palace insiders say had already been decided. Meghan Markle's residual custodial influence was formally voided following her withdrawal from proceedings. Princess Anne stated publicly that the Crown no longer recognized any maternal authority previously extended, emphasizing welfare over ambition. Licensing deals were nullified. Trust structures were dismantled. Passports secured. A centuries-old guardianship protocol, last used during the abdication crisis, was activated. If this story has changed how you see the modern monarchy, let us know in the comments. As of this report, Meghan Markle remains unreachable. Her team cites privacy. Harry remains isolated. The children remain protected. And the question echoing through both London and Los Angeles is no longer what happened, but why? What records were submitted behind closed doors? What was erased before the world noticed? And who, ultimately, stood still while everything else moved? Stay subscribed. This story isn't over. By the morning of February 4th, the atmosphere inside Kensington Palace had shifted from crisis response to long-term containment. This was no longer about reacting to events as they unfolded. This was about control, continuity, and precedent. According to senior palace sources, overnight briefings revealed that the sealed materials submitted to the Privy Council contained far more than custody concerns. They detailed what officials described as a systemic pattern of detachment, spanning financial, emotional, and symbolic separation from the children over the previous year. If you want to understand why this escalated so fast, stay with us. Among the documents was a timeline mapping Meghan Markle's gradual withdrawal from day-to-day parental decision-making. School correspondence unanswered. Medical authorizations delayed. Educational planning deferred indefinitely. In isolation, each incident appeared administrative. Taken together, advisors concluded they formed a strategy. A strategy not of co-parenting, but of exit. One confidential briefing note reportedly warned that the children were at risk of becoming jurisdictionally unanchored, lacking stable legal, educational, or cultural placement. For royal minors, that scenario triggers safeguards designed to prevent precisely what officials feared was unfolding. At this point, palace lawyers advised that delay itself had become the risk. If you believe institutions only act when their hand is forced, hit like now. Behind the scenes, foreign offices were already involved. Diplomatic channels quietly contacted US and Commonwealth counterparts to establish recognition of emergency guardianship authority. This ensured that any attempt to relocate the children without authorization would immediately trigger international compliance mechanisms. Sources say this step alone signaled that the monarchy viewed the situation not as a family dispute, but as a cross-border child welfare issue. Meanwhile, public silence was intentional. Royal communications staff reportedly rejected multiple draft statements, choosing instead to let procedural actions speak. The absence of spectacle was the spectacle. Contrast that with developments in California. According to individuals familiar with the matter, Meghan Markle's legal team attempted to frame the withdrawals as temporary, citing flexible learning arrangements. That explanation collapsed when school administrators produced written records showing no such plans had been communicated. If this is the first time you're hearing this angle, subscribe now, because the legal fallout is just beginning. In London, Prince William convened a secondary council session focused solely on precedent. Advisors warned that failure to act decisively would invite future attempts to commercialize royal minors under personal branding ventures. One advisor reportedly summarized the risk bluntly: if this succeeds once,
legal analysts argue such a request would not be floated without a belief that proximity existed.
By mid-afternoon,
ultimately,
the Crown's
royal
Child Welfare
commentators
Council
suggest the
formally
palace is
expanded
trapped.
the guardianship
Even
order,
acknowledging shared
clarifying that
acquaintances would
protection
invite scrutiny
extended
of vetting
beyond physical
processes and
custody
internal
to digital,
awareness.
reputational,
Silence
and
becomes the
commercial
safest
identity.
option. This returns attention once again to October 2016 and the leak from Andrew's household. The positive framing, the timing, and the source continue to raise eyebrows. From Harry's perspective, supporters argue he believes a straightforward story, a chance introduction, media hostility driven by prejudice, and a family that failed to protect his wife. Critics counter that others around him may have known more and chose not to complicate his happiness. According to sources, William's distance, Charles' caution, and Catherine's formality stem from operating with information Harry may never have had. In late December, Charles and Catherine reportedly discussed Andrew privately, focusing not only on past scandals but on what he knows and the risk of him speaking freely. Observers say Charles' priority now is containment, controlled access, limited privileges, and careful management to protect the institution
summarize the position starkly: emotion no longer overrides structure. Inside Windsor, however, the focus remained squarely on the children. Daily routines were stabilized, education assessments conducted, therapeutic support quietly integrated. The objective, sources emphasize, was normalization, not insulation. One advisor noted, the goal is not to erase their past. It's to anchor their future. If that distinction matters to you, share this video. As night fell on February 4th, a final internal memorandum circulated among senior royals. It contained a single directive: no retaliation, no escalation, no commentary. Let time and governance do the work. And so, while the world waited for a response that never came, the monarchy moved forward without fanfare. Not with accusations. Not with interviews. But with files, votes, and signatures. The unanswered questions remain. What compelled such a decisive withdrawal? Why were the children removed from public narratives before legal proceedings began? And what else lies sealed, unseen, inside those red folders? Stay subscribed. Because part 3 won't be speculation, it will be consequence. The internal posture of the monarchy had shifted again, this time from containment to recalibration. The immediate emergency phase was considered complete. What followed was something far more consequential: the quiet rewriting of long-term guardianship strategy, designed not for weeks or months, but for years. According to multiple insiders familiar with the process, the Crown's legal and welfare teams began drafting what was internally referred to as the continuity framework, a layered plan addressing education, identity, residence, and future public exposure for Archie and Lilibet. This was not reactive governance. This was architectural. If you're still following this story, stay with us. This is where the implications widen. At the heart of the framework was a single concern repeatedly flagged by advisors: identity fracture. Royal psychologists reportedly warned that prolonged instability, legal, geographic, or symbolic, could leave lasting consequences on children raised at the intersection of monarchy and celebrity culture. The solution proposed was neither isolation nor exposure, but controlled consistency. Sources say this recommendation carried enormous weight with Prince William. In private sessions, advisors emphasized that the children would one day grow old enough to question not just where they lived, but who decided. Any perception that the Crown acted impulsively or vindictively would undermine the very stability it sought to protect. As one briefing note reportedly stated, guardianship without legitimacy becomes another rupture. If you believe this moment will define the monarchy for a generation, hit like now. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the consequences of silence began to mount. Meghan Markle's continued absence, from court proceedings, public statements, and direct engagement, became a central issue in itself. Legal analysts noted that withdrawal from participation does not pause jurisdiction, it accelerates default outcomes. According to individuals close to the case, her legal team attempted to reopen dialogue through intermediaries, proposing limited virtual contact arrangements. Those overtures, however, were redirected into formal channels and subjected to strict review. No informal concessions. No exceptions. The message was consistent: process over personality. Inside Hollywood, the temperature dropped further. Projects once described as in development quietly disappeared from internal schedules. Risk assessments circulated among studios flagged unresolved guardianship disputes as a non-negotiable liability. One senior executive reportedly summarized the situation as untenable until clarity exists. If you're noticing how quickly access disappears when credibility wavers, share this video. Back in London, the Crown's Child Welfare Council expanded its mandate. Educational consultants were brought in to assess cross-cultural curriculum planning. The goal, sources say, was to ensure the children's schooling acknowledged both their British heritage and their American upbringing, without allowing either to become a commercial narrative. Even language mattered. Internal guidance reportedly discouraged the use of branding terms altogether. The children were to be referenced only in welfare contexts, not symbolic ones. Then came a development that caught even senior observers off guard. A confidential review panel, composed of non-royal child welfare experts, was convened to audit the Crown's own actions. This move, rare and deliberate, was designed to inoculate against future legal challenges by demonstrating external oversight. One advisor reportedly remarked, "If we are claiming to act in their best interest, we must be willing to have that claim tested." If accountability matters to you, comment below. By the end of the week, Prince Harry's position became clearer and more constrained. Any future involvement, sources say, would depend on demonstrated stability, compliance with guardianship structures, and disengagement from media mediation. Emotional appeals would not suffice. Documentation would. Observers close to the palace described this as the most painful aspect of the entire crisis, not because of punishment, but because of inevitability. Choices made earlier had narrowed the available paths. Inside Windsor, however, daily life continued quietly. Routine replaced disruption. Meals, lessons, walks, bedtime rituals. No press. No statements. No spectacle. The intention, according to caregivers, was to allow the children's nervous systems to recalibrate away from uncertainty. One staff member described it simply, "They need boring right now." If that line resonates, you understand what's really at stake. As February progressed, speculation outside the palace intensified, but inside, the approach remained unchanged. No retaliation. No counter-narratives. No engagement with provocation. Just structure. Just time. And just enough silence to let actions speak where words never could. The larger question now confronting both institutions and observers alike is not whether this crisis will fade, but what precedent it has set. Will this become the template for protecting royal minors in a digital age? Has the line between private parenthood and public obligation been permanently redrawn? And when these children are old enough to ask who decided their fate, what answer will history provide? Stay subscribed. Because the next chapter won't be about emergency powers or sealed folders. It will be about aftermath.